Hi, and welcome back to Creative Live TV. My name is Kate. I'm the host today, and I'm very excited to be bringing on Reyna Noriega. She is a artist, illustrator, writer, and educator. And today we're gonna talk about her art and her poetry, as well as have her show us a little tutorial on illustrating on the iPad in Procreate. And we're going to talk through some of her amazing art. And so I'm very excited to welcome Reyna to the show today. Welcome, Reyna. How are you?
I'm good, Kate. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for our chat.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you. So I discovered you on Instagram a while back from your beautiful art. So why don't we talk a little bit about you as an artist? From the start at school. And, it sounds like you went to um, art school, and you also studied psychology. You started out as a teacher, it sounds like, and then have ventured into being a full-time artist. So a little bit more about your background, and obviously introduce us to your pup.
So this is Pepper. She knows that there's some type of camera opportunity, so she's here. But basically, my journey with art, it's just been a lot of me gravitating towards what feels good. So my dad was an artist, and from a young age, I just enjoyed seeing him create things in his sketchbook, and then being out in the world and seeing like a patch embroidered that he digitized and stuff like that. And so, although I didn't know what I could do, I was always like trying new things, from, just writing early on to then photography and then painting and then illustration when I became an art teacher. And even that was unplanned. It was just like an opportunity presented itself where the art teacher had quit and they were like, well, we know that you like to draw. Do you want to try it out? And it was only supposed to be temporary, but it ended up just being like, I was so inspired by the kids, and the relationship was so good that it just became like a 4-year thing.
Oh,
And
wow.
during that time, yeah, during that time, it gave me the opportunity, as like the token creative of the faculty. I was making all the flyers and all the club t-shirts and things like that. And from there, it just like inspired me to try freelancing. And so I was doing a lot of that on the side. So by the time that I decided to transition out of teaching and, just like bet on myself and my ideas, I had been practicing that whole time, balancing, being a full-time teacher and part-time freelancer. So it made the switch a lot less chaotic, I would say.
Yeah. And tell me, like, was there something that specifically happened that made you feel like you were ready to jump into being an illustrator and artist full time? Or was it just that you kind of worked up enough clients and you were ready to make that transition?
Neither, actually. It was something that was kind of like in the back of my head. So I was making strides to do so. I was saving a lot more money and just like looking for a lot more opportunities, talking to freelance creatives that I knew, and figuring out like where the income streams come from, how do they keep it flowing and stuff like that. But when I resigned from teaching, I actually took another full-time job as a creative director. And so it was when when I left that job, that I was like, okay, I'm going to just try this out, and see how it goes.
Nice. And when was that? That was a couple of years ago?
That was 2018.
Okay. So you've
2018.
been full-time creative for the last couple of years. And what does that feel like now? I mean, I guess ultimately you were a creative your entire life, and obviously as a creative director you were, but how does it feel to be out on your own, and kind of making your own money as a creator?
Yeah, it feels really good. I mean, in the beginning, there was just a lot of discipline I had to learn, and just like there's a lot of fear and anxiety that comes with it. You always feel like your next client is somehow going to end up being your last. But
Yeah.
once I pulled myself through those mindsets, it was a lot more just enjoyable, and a lot. Um, I really treasure the way that I get to just split up my time the way that I want between my projects and client projects, and throughout it all I'm being creative. It's just a matter of like that balance.
Yeah, totally. So tell us a little bit more about your art. We've talked a little bit throughout the weeks as we were preparing for this about your art, and I think what I gravitated to following you was that your art represents a lot of different colors and shapes of women. And that was something that was really beautiful to me as someone who is a minority, to see an artist actually, representing people that look like me. And that's not something I get to always experience. So we talked extensively about that. And I would love to hear more about you and your art and why that's so important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it came from that place originally of just like wanting to see more representations of myself, and that being lacking in like the fine art space.
Yeah.
So it really started off selfish, like I was decorating my apartment and I wanted art for my walls, and I knew exactly the kind of stuff I would want to see up, but like looking for it, it just didn't exist, and
Yeah.
there was just like always something that was lacking from the way that I would want it 100%. So like there either wasn't enough color, or like the women depicted didn't reflect me and things like that. And so it was just going to be like a little series of like maybe 5 or 6 different illustrations. And then I figured, like I had been before, I would just like move on to the next thing. Because I've done like several small series or like projects or challenges. And then once it's over, it's like, okay, thank God that's over. Now I can try something else.
Yeah.
But it was just like the more that I did, like the more I was inspired by and the more that I wanted to see. And I was able to put so much of what I love in terms of just like architecture and like places that I've traveled or want to travel. And it was a way for me to just always have a visual of my highest self and like myself when I'm most at peace and when I'm most confident. And by diversifying the figures in the illustrations, I saw that I could do that for other women as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, what attracted me to your art was seeing somebody who was showing such a diverse group of women that, was every color and shape. And it was something that, I don't get to see all that often. And it was really nice to kind of meet you that way. And that's such an important part of your art. And it moved me. So I'm really excited to have you on to talk about how important that is. And so today you're going to be showing us one of your own pieces that you're doing in Procreate. And if you want to talk a little bit more about your art for yourself, is this a piece that you're making for yourself, or is this a project you're working on for a client that you're going to show us?
It is a piece for myself, and it's inspired by. So I talked to you a little bit about this too, like just between my writing and my art. My art has become, I get the most joy from other people seeing that representation for the first time and being excited about it and being able to like bring them joy and color and all of those things. And my writing does the same thing, but I think that my intention has remained for me to just like make sense of my feelings and to just like be 100% honest with myself and to like see it. It's been like a radical form of just healing and truth for me. And so it's interesting because I've published 2 poetry books. The first one, it was like I was so embarrassed is probably not the word, but I was just like so shy about it that it was something that like I didn't talk about. I didn't want anybody to clap for it. So mostly like my friends and people that they may have told about it or passed it on to were like reading it and sharing it and stuff like that. So it didn't really go too far. And then the second book, I just got so much more honest with myself and I poured so much more into it. And I became more aware of how sharing my story had the potential to inspire other people. So I did a lot more for that book in terms of just like celebrating it. Like I did a book cover reveal, and I self-funded and organized a mini book tour. Went to like five or six cities across the US and just like gathered some people and talked about the book and things like that. And so even then, it was like clearly doing better than the first book. But as my art has brought in a lot more eyes, there's been a lot more eyes on the book. And
Yeah.
so, and so even when sharing it and like, like this, like whatever you write, it's archived, like it's never going away. Like it's for years and years and years, there's going to be a copy somewhere. So I put things in there that it was kind of like just so real that thinking about all of the people that now have access to it, I've been like meandering between like wanting to shy away and then also being like, that's your truth, and you shared it
Yeah.
and it was healing, and now it's gonna help other people. So yeah, the piece that I want to draw for myself today is just kind of like a way to visually show that feeling,
Yeah.
I would say.
Cool. And so before we jump into you illustrating, can you tell me a little bit more about, you self-published your first poetry book. What made you decide to actually turn it into a book, since it was something that, you started out being for you? What made you want to kind of put it out there to the world in a way that, you weren't necessarily expecting to do at first?
Yeah. So I always wanted to be a writer. Like writing was my first love and the first thing that I thought I was good at, because just like in school, I would win prizes and stuff. And so I always struggled with like being a writer, but wanting to be an author. And it's like, what makes you an author? It's having a published book. So there was always that like insecurity of whenever people would say like, oh, what do you do? And I'd be like, oh, I'm a writer. And even though now I know that that's completely ridiculous and it doesn't matter, like you're a writer, and you're valid even before you've published anything. Back then I was always like, I'm so tired of saying that. I'm so tired of saying that, like I'm publishing something. I want to just publish something. So
Yeah.
all of the novels that I've written are just like somewhere in a USB, and I haven't edited them, so they'll probably stay there for more years to come. But the first book was just me working through finding myself while in a relationship, and just like that thought process as I was like becoming more attached, but then like realizing there's no guarantees, and then what that meant for what I had to give myself in terms of like just like self-esteem and security and things like that. And so I knew that that was something that everybody goes through as they fall in love. And we know that like all relationships are lessons, whether they last or not. But I think I've always noticed that what allows me to grow is that I see the growth in everything that I do, and I see the potential for growth and the journey through it all, and I'm grateful for it. Whereas a lot of people think that things just happen and they continue to just happen. And so I felt like by publishing it that way and by putting the poems in that sequence where people can see like how I'm building as these things are happening, it would also like click something for them as well, that like, okay, like all of this has happened for a reason. Like I've gone through similar things and it's pushing me towards like my higher self and through my greatness. And so it made it like a little bit easier to share.
Yeah.
And it just like, I don't know,
Honestly, you sound completely fearless. So many creators, including myself, get so crippled by the idea of actually putting their work out into the world. And I think you represent somebody who kind of got over that fear and now is kind of reaping a lot of those benefits in a way that you probably didn't expect. And it's really kind of catapulted your career, if at least from my viewpoint.
yes, absolutely.
So, all right, well, now let's jump into what you're going to be illustrating today. So
Okay.
while you flip over the camera, I'll remind everyone, this is Reyna Noriega. She is an artist, an illustrator, an educator who is based in Miami, Florida. She has multiple books, poetry books that are out now that you can buy. And she is also an incredible illustrator. Today, she's going to teach us a little bit about illustrating on her iPad Pro. She uses Procreate, and she is going to walk us through some of her process while we watch her turn this pencil drawing into a beautiful piece of art. So we're excited to walk through this, Reyna.
Okay, me too, me too. So I've already started, and I guess we can kind of talk about what I'm drawing as I draw it. But my thoughts were the parts of the book that make me the most uneasy, I guess, over the year that the book. So In Bloom is about my bloom essentially, and just like the growth that I experienced. And so
Can I pause you for 1 second? Is there a way we can pull the cam or move your iPad up just a little bit?
see
Yeah,
it?
there we
Yes,
go. That's better.
right
Perfect.
there. Okay. I'm trying to use the blanket to help it focus on.
There we go. That's perfect.
Okay. All right.
So I apologize. I interrupted. You were talking about In Bloom. That is your second poetry book.
Yes. So it's about just like the journey of growth that I was going through. And so something that I experienced, last year, that it was like kind of essential to that growth was just in terms of a relationship, again, which tends to be like a great lesson teacher for me.
Yeah.
But there was one particular breakup that I had experienced like 4 years prior that I had convinced myself that it was whatever, like it didn't really matter. And it would often just like come back up to the surface every now and then. And I realized it was because I had a lot of regret of just like all the things that I didn't say. So I just kind of had a moment where I had to finally be honest, which I'm sure hit my ex-partner out of left field because I had never been that honest. And it was just kind of like a moment for me to just surrender and just not harbor all of these like what ifs and this and that and this daydreaming, and just like take control of my reality. And at that moment, just like so much changed with the way that I communicated with myself, because like obviously I'm telling this person like I love you and I loved you then and I didn't say anything and blah blah blah. They're like, okay, like I haven't heard from you in forever, whatever, I care for you deeply, but like that's not where my head's at. And I felt so much freedom and like release in that moment. It was something that I had to include.
Yeah.
And I even I wrote a poem that is like titled in his name and things like that. So like as people read it and as it I took advantage, I guess, of the fact that like he's in a whole other continent. And I think that like now that it's traveling, I'm kind of like, oh my God, you guys
Do you
better
know if
not
he's
read
read
it.
it?
No, I don't think so. But yeah, so that part is just kind of like a little awkward, but I think it's still important. Like, I don't think, even knowing what I know now, if I could go back, I don't think I would have taken that out. Because it was just so special to me that I was like, finally, 26 years of life later, that I could be honest with myself and not think that like love has to be dependent upon someone reciprocating those feelings.
Yeah.
Or like having a guarantee that you won't face pain or rejection and stuff like that. So I think that
How therapeutic was it for you to get those feelings out, whether he did actually read the poem or you did actually talk through those feelings with him? It sounds like the process of writing for you was the therapeutic part, not necessarily the conversation afterwards.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's kind of like what I included, because I included the words that I wrote in the text message, and then the whole process after that, like when he responded, like I didn't read it right away. I kind of just like I meditated and I was like, it doesn't matter what he says, like what matters is that I'm honest. And so within that time, like I was just proud of myself that I stuck true to that. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
like sometimes I think that we tell ourselves like no matter what I'll be fine, and then we're still hoping that it's like what you want to hear, and then you're like not fine.
Yeah, totally.
But I was just like, I told myself that, and like I did my deep breathing and reminded grounded myself and all that stuff. And then I was just so happy to just know that I had been honest. Yeah. Finally.
So how is this drawing in any way, if it is, connected to any of your poetry?
So I was thinking of putting her, I want her to be like, I mean, she's me, so she's going to be kind of like in the moon, dreaming in her feelings. I think it also relates to my signs, astrology wise. I don't know if you're into astrology.
What is your sign?
I feel like my Libra moon and my Cancer rising is what really lets me like sink into my feelings and get all in there. So I just want her to be like connected to water and just like very mystical, and just like clearly by herself, like reflecting.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so as you're creating this, what we talked a little bit about how you choose your color palettes. What's going into this color palette that you're working on right now?
So knowing that I wanted to reflect like the night sky, I'm using a lot of blues right now. I'm not sure if it'll stay this way, just because I usually like to also use like my oranges. Like you can see my color palette, I use a lot of like teal and orange and stuff like that. So I might come back and change some colors, but for now I just want to get that feeling of like her dress, being able to double up as water.
Oh yeah, I see where you're going with that. So I wonder, and maybe this is right or wrong, but you have a lot of teals and oranges and greens, and you're based in Miami, Florida, and those are all kind of tropical colors. Do you find color palettes from your environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that my need for the vibrancy is definitely tied into just like my tropical setting, my Caribbean background. There's a lot of that because that was part of it. I think that I've seen a lot of illustration that is like minimal in nature. I've seen faceless. I've seen women that are dressed fashionably and things like that. So it didn't feel like my style was super innovative in that sense, but usually those illustrations were either like really based on reality and everything was just like colored the way you would see them in real life, or they were stuck to like neutrals, tan, beige, and browns and things like that. And it just felt like they all looked the same. So I wanted something that did not feel the same as everything that I was seeing.
And so when you start on a drawing like this, and remind me, you're using Procreate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So most of the time when you are drawing, you start kind of with a pencil drawing like you did here, and then you import it to Procreate, and then you add all the colors afterwards, right? Or did you do the sketch drawing on Procreate as well?
Yeah, so I've done it both ways. This time I did the sketch just straight on Procreate.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I enjoy doing it both ways. So I think behind her will probably have some. Sorry, talk to me.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so from reading a little bit about your history, when you became an art teacher, it sounds like you ended up teaching a lot of graphic design classes. Did you have experience in graphic design, or was that something you learned? And tell me about kind of transitioning, and now graphic design is such a big part of your career. Was that something that you felt comfortable with, or were you kind of thrown into it?
I was definitely thrown into it. I thought that I was teaching traditional. Okay, where is the loophole? I thought I was teaching traditional art, and it turned out to be digital art and visual technology. And so I really had to learn like on the spot, because I could not let the kids know that I didn't know what I was doing, because that was part of the problem. They had already run out like a couple of art teachers. Like I was going to be like the fourth teacher in the span of a year. And so they were kind of like not afraid to make your life miserable if they were not having fun. And I had used digital art for, not digital art, I had used Photoshop for my photography. Oh, this is interesting. I'm not mad at that. I had used I had used digital art for my photography, and so it was just a matter of like figuring it out for illustration. But I was definitely open to the challenge.
It's funny you say that because I'm right now reading Roxane Gay's book Bad Feminist. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or know Roxane Gay, but she was actually just on our CEO's podcast a few weeks ago, and she has a very similar experience when she becomes a college professor of being like, oh crap, I don't know what I'm doing, and I can't let these kids know that I don't know what I'm doing just as much as they do. And I think that experience is a very common experience that people don't talk about very often. It's just how, as a creative and as an entrepreneur, you're just learning every day, and you're kind of evolving every day. It's not just a finite skill that you learn. It's just every day something else changes and you have to evolve, and that's scary every time you step up in front of somebody and you're expected to be teaching. And that's part of teaching in general, but I think it's a common thing in creative ventures that you're kind of figuring it out as you go. And that's this weird secret kind of that creatives don't talk about a lot, is just that none of us really know what we're doing. We're all figuring it out, but it's actually doing the work, which is something our CEO Chase talks about, is actually getting the work out there is how you're going to build that muscle and feel confident next time. Exactly. And you kind of did that to a T with your book. Is both your you weren't, doesn't sound like you were necessarily ready to get that out into the world, but you forced yourself. And then the second time when you wrote your book, it made it that much easier because you forced yourself to do what you didn't know how to do. And the next time that thing comes up, all of a sudden you know how to do it a little bit better, and it's a little less scary.
Yeah, and that's something I try to emphasize with my audience, with whoever will listen, and that's just like to start whatever it is that you want to do. Just start, because you cannot see improvement if you never begin and if you don't have anything to just base your growth off of. And I think it would be so much more beneficial to people as a society, if they understood that all of the people that they look up to and all of the things that they aspire to be are within reach. You just have to not give up and not count yourself out.
Absolutely.
My first book had like, so even though like I reread it by myself, which is probably part of the problem, because your eyes kind of like read it reads what it wants to read, you know, like it knows what you mean. So you think that you're proofreading, but really you're just like, I don't know, you're like, you've already memorized it and your eye is like skimming stuff. But I had like so many typos in the first one. And it's like a weird thing, because I felt like I failed when I put it out and I realized that there was still typos in it. I was like, oh my God, people are gonna think that I'm just like not smart and blah blah blah. And even to this day, I forgot what book that I was reading, but like I think pretty much every book from every author that I admire, I will find a typo and it'll be like, this thing has been in print for years. This has gone through reprints. This has gone through editors, and I'm still finding typos. So why would I be so hard on little old me who is doing the writing, the designing, the formatting, the
Yeah.
illustrating, like everything for myself, with no one to kind of like bounce anything off of?
And that it it must be this kind of, when you see those typos, what a sense of relief at times, where you're like, oh, this person probably
Yeah.
had a whole team, and I still find little errors, and it allows you to stop being so obsessed with perfection, because really
Mm-hmm.
you got so much value out of that book or whatever that piece of art was, whether that typo was there or not. You know, it's actually getting it out into the world and not being worried about an error or something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Looks like
And
it's
every
coming
time, I mean, I
together.
still had typos. Yeah, it is. I had typos in the second book, but it's like, you know, there was definitely less of them, and they're more so not even spelling errors. Like I just kind of noticed that I had a weird apostrophe somewhere for no
Mm-hmm.
reason. Like it just kind of like I must have hit the key or something, didn't notice it, and like just things
Yeah.
like that. That it's like, it's okay. The next time, like there'll be even less and less.
And as an artist, how, how do you not struggle with perfection? I think we all do, and you seem like you're really good at forcing yourself not to be perfectionist, and getting your work out into the world, because that is how you grow as an artist. Was there anything is there anything that you do or that has happened to you in the past that has allowed you to kind of get over that hump that so many people struggle with?
Um, I try to think about that all the time, because I think what has helped me most is that I don't have I let myself pivot and I let myself flow with what is working, and whatever is not working, I kind of like table it. Which I'm glad that I kind of stuck to the idea at a young age, that like, even though everyone says that like you have to pick one thing and you have to be really good at it, I really like that I allow myself to explore everything that inspires me and everything that, makes me feel good creatively. Because if ever anything does not feel right and I am failing terribly, I'm not going to say like, forget this, like I have to focus on something I'm good at. I'm going to say like, okay, right now this is stressing me out and this doesn't feel good, so I'm going to leave it alone for a bit and I'll come back to it. And when I come back to it with just like fresh eyes, fresh energy, it tends to work out a lot better. And I think that like looking back at multiple steps in my journey, like I knew as a kid with like the fantasy that I wanted to be the kind of adult that worked from home and had like a studio in their house. But it wasn't it wasn't like I was going to feel like a failure if that didn't happen. It was kind of like I kept chasing opportunities. I did internships and I kept going around the things that felt good and felt like it was taking me closer to my goals. But it wasn't like, I don't know, like I get a lot of people that when they ask me certain questions, it features a lot of just like rush, like how do I build my following and like how do I get X amount of clients like really fast? And it's like, I don't know how to help you with that because that was never my focus. It was just more so like, how do I keep growing? How,
Yeah.
if I make mistakes, because we're all going to make mistakes, how do I learn from them? How do I ensure that I'm like just making sure that the foundation is strong? And I think I've watched a lot of people that I've admired, and I'm always super curious as to like what causes a person to like fail, or to disappear, and I've seen like that burnout. So it's like I've never chased notoriety, but more so just like making your foundation strong.
Yeah, and I think that's a commonality I continually hear among creatives is, success often comes, and I think a lot of people get, they see someone's following grow by 50,000 overnight because of one thing, but that person has really been working, and it just happened to be that piece is what grew. But ultimately, they've been doing the work for 10 years, and you never saw it. And it's something that you speak to, never doing it for the never doing it for the money or the notoriety, and always doing it for yourself. And I think that's the most important thing to do as a creator is, finding what moves you. And you have so many things that have moved you. It feels like, lots of creative ventures have excited you. And how do you decide to pursue one over the other?
Yeah. And I don't. I don't. It would be too hard. And I wanted to note also, like, as far as what you were saying, I read, I don't know if I read or I heard it on an interview, but that was something that was stuck to me. I think it was like a podcast or something, and it was a musician, and they were just saying about how, like, at one point in their career, even though no one was listening to it, they just put out so much music so that when the time did come, that somebody stumbled across their stuff, they had all of this like catalog to go through, and just to like really fall in love with that. And I think about a lot of things that I have made that in the moment might have felt like a failure. Like even the earrings, I made some earrings with my friend, and she does like, she laser cuts the wood and she does it by hand, and we paint them by hand, and we designed them together, and we made it, and we were super excited about them. And I mean, I was just happy that anybody bought them and wore them, but it was just kind of something like we were selling maybe like 5 a month,
Yeah.
And I was just like so excited about how they turned out. I was kind of like shocked by it, but I didn't consider them a failure. I was just like, okay, whatever, like I'm gonna note this, like maybe people don't like earrings as much as I thought they would, but that's that. And now, since like everything else has blown up, like people are a lot more interested in the earrings, and it's like, it's cool that it's there so that as people are discovering my stuff, like they can choose what works and what fits their lifestyle, whether it's prints or canvas or earrings or whatever, and it's just like all there.
And that's such an interesting point you bring up, because I think we often, when we're creating, we set these like lofty goals of like, oh, this is going to be the piece that makes me blow up. And to your point, you didn't have that. When you were making them, you were just making the earrings out of joy and collaboration with your friend, and you didn't have that expectation. And now that your audience is growing from other things, that you're seeing the results of people discovering those earrings in a way that they hadn't before, and really setting X goal in the beginning may have really made you feel crappy at the end because it didn't happen, but now it's happening in a way that you didn't expect. And so it's interesting, we're as a country, we're very obsessed with hitting benchmarks and goals. And I think you bring this kind of interesting perspective of just letting whatever you do out into the world without any expectations, and then seeing what happens can lead to really beautiful things.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of brings me to on your website that is, art is lasting, life is brief. And I think that kind of speaks to you as an artist, which is that you're going to kind of get your work out into the world regardless of how you feel about it, and you're going to share it with people so they can experience the experiences or have their own experiences through your art. And I just wanted to speak a little bit more about that quote and what it means to you.
Yeah, I think it's funny because that was something that I made. It was my first tattoo. I don't know if you guys, it'll probably be awkward if I try to show you from here, but I think you can see it on the picture on my website. But it was my first tattoo, and it was something that, like, it was just a quote that I came up with.
Yeah.
And I like went and translated it in Latin, and like I asked somebody that had studied Latin if it made sense, and it did. But I was always very concerned with leaving a legacy, like whether I have kids or not. When I think of like what I want to be remembered for, I wanted to have some type of like positive impact on others. So I think like being popular is not what's important. It's just like how you're able to inspire people. And when I think about art, when I think about writing, and just the way that the way that it lasts and it has an impact, and something that meant something like centuries ago, like can still impact a society. I was just always super interested in all of that.
Yeah. And what made you, decide to get a tattoo, and what made you choose Latin to put it in?
Just it being such an old and something that has lasted, even though we say that like Latin is a dead language, but we still use it. We use it in science. It's just something that has stood the test of time, and the same way that I would want my work to.
And when did you get that tattoo? How old were you?
When was that? It was, I want to say after college. Might have been 2015 or later. Actually, I think I got this recently. Yeah, it was like 2018. It was like after my teaching days or something like that.
Okay. So it looks like that. So originally you were playing with some oranges in the background. It looks like you've transitioned to blues.
Yeah, I think I might keep it blue. I'm still not sure. I feel like, I don't know. And I want to think if everything is if everything is like represented as far as me, because I don't think that I'm just blue. I think that this would signify like sadness, and we're not sad. We're very happy.
So is that, to that point, when you are creating like this, is that something you naturally think about, that this color palette typically represents X emotion? Is that something that kind of guides your creativity, is what emotion the colors evoke?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's something that as I've just like worked and created more, it's been a lot easier for me to make that distinction. I remember when I was like first starting and first illustrating, because you can just like, I can change this all day. You know, it's digital. I can change the
Yeah.
color, I can change it back, I can add things, I can delete them. I think it's very hard to make that decision of like, okay, when are you done?
Yeah,
And
totally.
I've had to learn over time to just like get a feel and like let myself get a feeling from it. And if that's the feeling that I'm trying to evoke, leave it alone. Um, and just like let it go from there.
And so when you're starting a drawing, is there to work or reverse engineer, do you start with the feeling and then create the drawing and then find the color palette, or is sometimes there a different kind of flow of your creativity?
There can be a different flow, but I think typically it's that like if I'm trying to say something, like I know what I want to say, and then I kind of feel through what is going to best portray that. There are times when like, you know, you'll just see an image, or you know, like you're working for somebody else, so they already have the reference and stuff like that. um and you can kind of like play with it. But if there's something that I know that I'm trying to say, it's a lot easier to just like feel through it.
So tell us what you're doing right now. It looks like you're adding some texture to the background.
Yeah, so I just added my texture. um that's something that I like, just because I like the feeling of, I still want it to feel like a drawing on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, let's see, I'm gonna try playing with this orange. Yeah, versus just like a flat digital drawing. Not that there's
Yeah.
anything wrong with that. Um, I just prefer, you know, I don't mind the contrast.
And
But I have
what
to be
kind, did you create those textures in Procreate yourself, or did you find texture somewhere, or are you using textures they have within the software?
No, this is something that I scanned and I'm using. And then
Okay.
you can like, yeah, you can kind of use it on a, I use it on a linear burn. I used to use multiply, and then I decided that no, I wanted it more drastic. I wanted to really show.
Yeah.
Because I've seen I used to like that a lot. I think it's the illustrator Petra, is it Erickson, I think, that she
Uh-huh.
uses texture, but you really have to squint, like you wouldn't even notice it. And when I first you know, when you're first into illustration and you're looking up all this inspiration, that was something I really, really loved. So when I first started using texture, I was using it like very light. Like I didn't want you to notice it at first. Like you almost had to like look really closely. But I
Yeah.
realized that I like it exaggerated personally.
And what evolved in with you as a creator or with your art that caused you to kind of make that transition and that you wanted it to be more noticeable? Was there something that, is it just stylistically that you felt that way, or was there something else in the digital, graphic design world, or it to me often, some like having that texture feels like it's more tangible in some way, and it feels
Mm-hmm.
it adds some depth in some capacity. Yeah, what was it that kind of made you want to take that transition to something that feels a little bit more textured?
It became very clear to me early on. Like my goal before I could draw, I wanted to be an artist. So
Yeah.
I always had like this dream and this vision of myself with like, you know, solo art shows and just like in a studio. So painting was my first like traditional art love.
Yeah.
And I had taken a break. I took like a 4-year painting hiatus just because like I was painting super hyper realism, and like it didn't match my personality. So I was doing it because I wanted people to know that I was skilled. And that's like a terrible place to come from. But it's like I was pushing myself to just continue improving, and my shading and like everything had to be the best that you'd ever seen. And it was not about me. It was not about my enjoyment. It was not a mess. Like it was lacking a lot of stuff. So pretty much like instantly, once I started this series and all of the missing components were there, like I finally knew what colors I was into. I knew what types of shapes I was into. I knew what types of subjects. I felt ready to jump back into painting. And then, so it just became about like what I would want my paintings to look like. And I would want them to feel just very like tangible, like something you want to touch and something that has been like worked with and not perfect. So I wanted it to be like as imperfect as possible, even though in digital, that's sometimes not the case. You know, it's like perfect lines, perfect shapes. So yeah, it was kind of like that intersection for me.
I love that idea of putting imperfection into something that has the ability to be perfect. You know, in the digital world, you have the ability for everything to be perfectly precise. And, you know, you see that a lot in digital art. And I think it's really cool that you want to add that kind of sense of imperfection, because it makes it more real and human in some capacity.
Yeah.
So tell me what you're doing to the dress right now.
I just added a pattern, which is something that I have been enjoying lately. And yeah, I'm really at the point where I need to decide what I want this to feel like. And you know, part of that probably is that I have planned to let's see if that's still open. Yeah, I had planned, oh, it's gonna go away, and I'm not gonna take y'all through my photo album, but I had planned to put words on it. So like words from In Bloom, like one of the poems that, okay, I'll put the camera, you guys can see me for a second while I see if I can find the poem. So there's just things, you know, I've signed a lot of NDAs lately, and the last thing I need is for like a project sneak peek to come out or something.
Understood. Is that something that you do a lot, is incorporate your poetry into your designs?
It's something that I would want to do more. I was looking at like my page, and I noticed that I haven't really shared. I've just been so busy, but I do like to, like, it's marketing in one way. Like it kind of refreshes people's memories that the book exists, and also pairs it with like a digital illustration. And also, like, for me, sometimes there are things that I revisit in the book that like are speaking to me currently. And if I have something to say, like, I find that Instagram and like the captions are a really good place to start a conversation about anything that is like on your mind. And it's nice to see people engage with it, and like, you know, just going through similar things. So yeah, I do enjoy that.
Yeah.
I see.
And did you have a specific poem that you had thought tied with this piece of work before you started, or did it kind of come to you as you were working through it?
There was one, and I'm trying to see if I screenshot it. Yeah, I think it was one. It was one that kind of like came after that moment in the book. Why are they moving?
And
yeah, so
just so I can remind everyone, the moment, I assume what you're talking about is the moment you kind of let all that relationship go, and you got those words out on the paper, and you, you know, kind of leaned into your independence, and you healed from a hard breakup that you know you hadn't dealt with the feelings yet, and so I assume that's what you're speaking to.
Yes. So let me know if I'm if I'm straight again. So
Yep,
I don't know if you
looks
guys
good.
can read it, but the poem says, "The surrender I was looking for came from action. The clarity I needed was born from a mess of tears and confessions, of less than ideal responses, fluttering angry butterflies, but in the morning I was free." And then it's
Wow,
titled
that's
The Freedom Was Worth It. Okay, and those
that
were
is
all.
really beautiful. So
Okay,
how do you walk us through putting this text on this piece?
yeah. So normally, because this is like a screenshot from a PDF, so the quality is probably going to be terrible. Normally, I would probably just copy and paste this in Illustrator and make sure like the font is something that would be legible on Instagram. Maybe it'll work. No, see, it's not going to work. Yeah, so I'll probably do that when this is all over.
Yeah, what we can do, and if you're willing, we'll tease everybody because it's hard for us to see on screen. But after after we are done with the live stream, if you don't mind sharing this piece, so we can share it across our social platforms, so people can see the poem more clearly, we would love to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Did you have any preferences with this dress? What were your thoughts as I was flipping through?
Let's see, can you flip through them a little bit more?
Yeah, so the first thing, I kind of like the pattern because I think everything else is such like big, bold shapes. So
I love the pattern.
But then I would just decide, like normally I'll use a color that's very close to the color it is, so it's not as stark of a contrast.
Yeah.
But every now and then you just, you get kind of adventurous.
I was feeling a kind of mint green. But that's real nice too. Yeah, I mean, they just evoke totally different feelings. One is look at the dress, and the other one is kind of look at the woman. And I think, from this conversation, while I was attracted to the mint green, I feel like the piece really speaks to the dress is kind of a oh, that's nice.
Oh, which one? What did I do?
Really nice.
The dark blue?
It was no, the darker green. There we go. That looks real nice. But what I was saying was, the piece itself represents this strong woman who's gotten over this breakup and now is feeling herself. So I guess I don't know. It feels like the dress could be represented in two different ways. When I'm feeling myself, I like to dress up and look and put on something that makes me feel good, and that kind of speaks to what this dress looks like to me now.
I agree. I like this. And selfishly, this green is like what I'm using in my feed right now, so it'll blend in.
It goes back to where we started, which is you have a lot of green and orange and pink tones, and I think I'm also attracted to those tones. If you look at my wallpaper behind me, it you match the color palette that I have as well, and so I think that was coincidental, but I love where we've ended.
Yeah, I like the contrast of this blue. I'm gonna leave it.
Yeah, I like the contrast to the blue too.
Yeah, and the words will just, live over here. And yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy with it.
Yeah,
I love it. Shading.
Well, I think that brings us to our stream. I really, really appreciate you joining us and showing us your workflow and watching this this piece of work go from a sketch to this beautiful piece. And thank you for letting me add some input. It's been really fun to watch this come to life.
No, thank you. Well, here I am. I've had a lot of fun. And yeah, this turned out different than I expected, but I'm happy.
When you were getting started, were you kind of expecting it to be those blue tones that we were talking about in the beginning?
Yeah, and I think this is just like a lot more going on than I've been drawing recently, so it's fun. It's like a change. Like I've been doing very simple like positionings and like very few colors, so this is a lot more like mystical. Yeah, I know that there's a lot of people really like that too. They like that, like the moon, the lunar stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think we don't have a full moon. We were a half moon last night when I was out on my walk. But anyways, I think everyone will be really excited to see the poem next to it when you're finished. So I'm excited to share that with everyone. I want to remind everyone that this is Reyna Noriega. You can follow her on Instagram at Reyna Noriega. And her new book, In Bloom, is an incredible poetry book. If you go over to her website, which is her name, we have it pinned to the top of the comments for you guys to go check out her work. And she is an artist, illustrator, poet, and an educator. And we really hope to have her back to teach us some more stuff about Procreate and writing in the future. So thank you so much, Reyna, for joining us today. And I can't wait to see the finished product and to share it with everyone. I think everyone will be really excited to see the combination of your poetry and your art together.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today, and we'll be back tomorrow with a new episode on CLTV. Thanks.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Chase Jarvis, founder and CEO of CreativeLive. You all know that we have more than 2,000 classes and more than 10,000 hours of learning, inspirational, and motivational content on the platform. I'm super excited to announce a new experience on CreativeLive. It's called Fast Class. You've told us that you're busy and sometimes it's hard to dive into a full class from start to finish. So essentially, we're now giving you a shortened highlight version of our top CreativeLive classes. You can always dive into the full class with 5, 10, or 15 hours of great content. But now, if you're just looking to focus on a few of the highlights or want to be able to skip quickly to something that really interests you, you can now get a shortened fast class version of that class. We're also thinking this might be able to help you explore a new craft and save time while doing it. This is a great tool to curate your learning experience to help create the life that you seek. So you're probably thinking, great, how do I access this new experience on CreativeLive? That's easy. All you have to do is be a subscriber to the Creator Pass, and then all this is yours. If you're feeling isolated and looking for creative connection, try tuning into creativelive.com/TV. That's where we've got a 24/7 live stream from the kitchen counters.
I can do that backlit shot that I really like to do.
From the studios and living rooms of many of the world's top creators, where we're doing musical performances, Q&As, cooking shows, virtual book tour events, drawing, spoken word poetry, and more.
Life passed me by waiting for an invitation when the world is greater than my nation or my occupation. Be someone you've never been. You feel all that adrenaline, it's medicine.
It actually helps me feel like my days are more purposeful.
I hope that out of this deep pain will come some collective growth.
Dive into CreativeLive TV today.